welcome to the EUMETSAT video looking at the world's weather of 2022. We're going to take you on a tour of the whole world as seen by the EUMETSAT satellites, as well as the geostationary satellites from our colleagues in the US and Japan. You'll see that the most severe tropical cyclones have been marked with their names, and you'll see as the year evolves just how the storm systems move around our planet. So here we are at the later stage of January. If you have a look at Madagascar, you'll see a small tropical cyclone just moving over on January the 24th. That was then followed by a much more severe tropical storm Batsira, and then that was followed by yet another storm. Now you can see these storms have their evolution in the middle of the Indian Ocean and then travel over towards the east and over towards Madagascar. These storms have an incredible impact on the populations that live there. Now the weather forecasters of course have these images and can see the formation of the storms in the southern Indian Ocean, but they also have access to the computer models, and those computer models contain even more satellite data that we can't show here that gives even more days warning before those storms come. So the weather forecasters in those areas are getting 5 to 7 days of warning. That means that they can warn the communities, and organisations like the Red Cross and the national government are able to prepare. Now there's much more things that happen when the forecast is issued now. So the Red Cross, for example, was already mobilising its emergency response to those storms even before they arrived. So let's now look at what's going on in Europe. You'll see the end of the winter and the beginning of spring. So we see the storm systems that travel across the Atlantic, bringing snow and rain. And you'll also sometimes see storm systems building up in the Mediterranean region, traveling across the Mediterranean over Italy, Greece, and towards Cyprus and Turkey. At this time of year, we also in 2022 had a very, very dry spring. So already we were starting to see the first indications of drought and the first indications that we would have quite an active fire season. Because there hadn't been as much snowfall as in previous years, and because we didn't see much moisture, precipitation falling in the early part of the years, particularly in the Iberian Peninsula, there was already signals of dry surface area, of the forests and the brush not quite getting the moisture they need. And you can see that from some of the other satellite data we have. So we're able to monitor the growth of crops and see that dryness as the spring progresses. So here we are, we're now in April. So we're now in Northern Hemisphere spring, Southern Hemisphere autumn. What we're starting to see across the Northern Hemisphere is we start to see some of those fires. And if you want to know more about those fires, you can see cases that we have on the EUMETSAT website that pick out some of the fires that we saw in Europe and in the Arctic regions at this time. Take a look at the whole globe and we'll just have a quick tour of everything that you can see. So at this point, you can see in both the north and southern hemispheres, in the extremes, those storm systems traveling from the west to the east, this flow of the large scale systems. And in the center, in the equatorial regions, you're seeing this pulsation. These small clouds that grow up during the day due to the heat of the sun on the earth, and then they create the real wet season rainstorms that they see in those regions. And you'll see that kind of pulsing from east to west, and that just reflects the passage of the sun over the earth. So that's called the intertropical convergence zone. So it's where we see the warm air meeting at the surface and rising and generating those storm systems. So now it's the beginning of June. We're just moving into summer in Europe. And the summer 2022, we saw quite some significant series of heat waves. So this was due to the positioning of the high pressure systems in the Atlantic that really drive our weather systems and pulling warm air up from the Saharan region into Central Europe. So we saw quite some days with significantly high temperatures, high pressure over Central Europe. And how you can see that in these images is you'll see the cloud systems being moved much more to the north instead of coming over to the south and across the European landmass. Now, as we move into the peak of summer in July, the sun has more time to heat the oceans. So what we'll see as the year progresses is you'll start to see the formation of the Atlantic hurricane systems, and we'll also start to see many storm systems in the Mediterranean region that are driven or fueled by those warmer temperatures. So you'll see some quite fast-moving, localized storm systems in the Mediterranean from time to time. So at the end of July, we've also seen quite some build-up of the rain systems in the Indian subcontinent. And during the course of 2022, there was a significantly more rainfall in Pakistan than there has been in previous years. Now, this wasn't one single rain event. This was the whole series of rain events due to the build-up of the weather systems and the weather patterns in that region. So there was a heat low over Pakistan, and that was leading to a lot more rainfall than is usually seen. And that was flooding large areas of the country surrounding some of the river areas. There's a couple of cases on this on the EUMETSAT website, and you can see from our data how much rainfall was falling. There's much more high-resolution satellite imagery also available from other sources as well. With the warming of the oceans, we see more of the Atlantic hurricanes now, and you'll see those, of course, with the names as they travel over. Now, those hurricanes are formed with the wave of energy that travels across Africa, that then travels over the ocean, picks up energy as it travels over the warm ocean, and if there's just enough that it starts to rotate, then these storms will start to develop. So if you watch the full life cycle of a hurricane, you'll see them develop over the Atlantic Ocean, just off the coast of Africa, travel across the Caribbean, and then some of them will curve back towards Europe and become thunderstorms and severe storms for us, and become severe storms for us in Europe. And some of them will actually curve and come over towards the US. Some of those storms actually really get their energy going when they get into the Gulf of Mexico, or they'll form on the west coast of the States and actually have quite a short lifetime. You'll see that it's not, of course, just the US basin that's having these hurricanes. There are also the typhoons forming in the Pacific Ocean. And again, you'll see those, they travel for quite some days and then curve up towards the places that they are affecting. And those are really fueled by the warmth of the oceans. So you see as they hit the land, they really decay away quite quickly. As we head into October, I'd like to talk about something that you can't see in these images. So we always have operational satellites available to look at the Earth. These satellites have a fixed lifetime, they're then replaced by the newer models. And during October, we saw the final decommissioning of the Meteosat 8 satellite. This satellite was launched 20 years ago and was working for that full 20 years, looking over Europe, Africa, and it ended its operational life looking over the Indian Ocean. Now in November, we're seeing the last of the tropical storms. We're very much moving into the autumn storm season in the European area. So we're seeing much more of those storm systems traveling across the Atlantic, bringing rain and occasional snow over the European area. And if you look down in the southern hemisphere, you'll see that the southern hemisphere storms are now much further south. The tropical zone, that tropical belt, is also much further south. And you see the summer rainfall systems, those summer convection storms across Australia, southern Africa, and Latin America. You can also see in the early stages of winter just how those storm systems stayed a little bit further north. And what that's giving us an indication of is the underlying pressure systems that were driving our weather at this time. And those pressure systems led to an unusually mild December in Central Europe. Very dry and very warm. It wasn't until quite late on in the season that we saw the first winter snows come to the mountainous areas. So this whole world of weather is only possible with cooperation. Here we've taken weather data from our own satellites, but also from Japan and the US. Now this is made possible through the coordination activities of CGMS, the Coordination Group on Meteorological Satellites. And to actually create these images, we've worked with our colleagues in Météo-France, thank you to you, to create this wonderful look at the year of weather in 2022.